Two people. They'd known each other a long time, the particular kind of long that doesn't need much to be said. They came in separately that day, which was unusual. The room was quiet. One arrived first, stood for a moment near the door, set something down without ceremony, and waited. When the other came in, nothing dramatic happened. A hand on an arm. Brief. The kind of contact that doesn't ask permission because it doesn't need to. Then they found their seats, got on with whatever they were there to get on with. Nobody else noticed. I did. I noticed most things from here. What I noticed was this. The person who'd been waiting knew that the other one was carrying something. They didn't know what. They hadn't been told, and they didn't ask. They just knew. The way you know when you pay attention to people over time, that this was a day when the weight was heavier than usual. And they did the small, sufficient thing, without announcement, without expectation of return. That was it. That was the whole of it. A hand on an arm. The impulse doesn't arrive at random. It finds the people who are actually in the room, who noticed, without trying to notice, that something had shifted in the person beside them. You can't feel another person's weight from a distance. The presence comes first. The kindness follows. From here, they're almost indistinguishable. Kindness has been handled too much. It's been put on posters, made into hashtags, printed on the kind of objects that end up in charity shops. It's begun to feel like a project, something to be undertaken, a quality to be built from scratch through effort and intention. As though the person standing in the doorway was starting from nothing. They're not starting from nothing. Almost every person who has come through that door already knows how to do this. They weren't taught it, or rather they were once very early, and then the teaching stopped. Before the performance started. Before the fear of what other people thought came to outweigh the simple directness of caring about them. Before the armor went on and the efficiency began and the days started to be organized around what could be achieved rather than who was nearby. There was a time for almost every person in this room when kindness wasn't a value. It was the first response, the default. They haven't lost it. They've only stopped letting it go first. It comes back in this room more times than I can count. And it almost always comes back the same way. Not through decision, not through someone choosing to be kinder as a result of reflection or resolution. It comes back through contact. Someone is in difficulty, not always visibly, not always in a way that's obvious from across the room, and someone else simply responds. Before thinking about it, before calculating whether it's appropriate, whether it'll be welcome, whether they have the standing to offer it, they just do the thing. A glass of water, unrequested, an ear lent without an agenda. The willingness to stay in the room when it would be easier to leave. They're almost always small things. And then something interesting happens to both of them. The person on the receiving end doesn't generally respond with gratitude. They respond with relief. As though a tension they'd been holding, a quiet expectation that the world would continue to require things of them while offering nothing back, releases slightly. And the person who did the thing almost never looks proud of themselves. They look slightly surprised, as though they'd forgotten they were capable of it, as though the action had reminded them of something about themselves they'd stopped expecting to find. That's the thing worth returning to. Not that the action was kind, that it came so naturally once the opportunity was there. It didn't feel like virtue, it felt like recognition. like running into someone you hadn't seen in a very long time. There's a version of this I've watched fail. The failure is instructive. Sometimes someone in this room decides to be kind, as a position, as something they'll now do systematically because they've decided it matters and they want to be the sort of person for whom it matters. This isn't a bad instinct. The instinct is right. The problem is the mode. Decided kindness has a quality about it. You can feel it if you're in the room with it. A slight self-consciousness, a beat of awareness. Am I getting this right? That arrives just after the action, sometimes just before. The other person can sense it. The kindness lands, but alongside it there's another thing. The weight of the gesture, the virtue of the gesture. It's not that it fails to be kindness, it's just heavier than it needs to be. The other kind, the unreflective kind, the first response kind, is lighter. It arrives without announcing itself. And because it doesn't announce itself, the other person doesn't have to decide what to do with it. They can just receive it. That's why it's a default, not a practice. The moment it becomes a practice, it acquires overhead. And the overhead, however well-intentioned, gets in the way. I've watched the impulse arrive in this room and then not happen. The quick thought, the immediate sense that something is needed here. The small thing the person wanted to do before they had a chance to question it. And then the questioning. On the grounds that it might not land right, or might not be their place, or might be misconstrued. The moment passes, and the person on the other side of it leaves not knowing the offer was almost made. The person who held it back takes their coat and goes, leaving something behind. Not on me, not always, but somewhere. A small, persistent weight. The people who do the thing, who act on the first impulse before the examination arrives, carry lighter when they leave. Not because they saved anyone, not because the gesture was large, because they were, for a moment, entirely themselves. The unguarded version, the one I see before they walk through the door. The impulse that arrives before the hesitation, that one's worth following. The small thing. The thing that costs almost nothing and announces nothing and asks for nothing back. The hand on the arm, the glass of water, the willingness to simply stay. The unreflective, first response, almost forgotten thing you used to do before the world persuaded you to think harder before offering it. The other person will feel the difference. They always do. The thing offered without overhead lands clean. It doesn't ask them to receive it in any particular way. It just arrives. It was always there. You just stopped letting it go first. I'll still be here when you get back.